My first paycheck was dated 5 years ago, and I didn't notice at first. That's the part that scares me now. I was already 3 hours into the night shift, sitting alone behind a reception desk that hummed louder than it should, under fluorescent lights that flickered like they were tired of pretending. The building was quiet in the way abandoned places usually are. No wind, no traffic noise, just the low electrical breathing of a place that refused to fully die. There were supposed to be other employees. At least, that's what the job listing said. Night security, light clerical work, easy money. Instead, it was just me, a dusty binder of procedures, and clocks that didn't agree with each other. The one above the desk said 2:17 a.m. The one on my phone said 2:41. Neither of them moved while I was watching. I was flipping through paperwork to stay awake when I found the envelope. My name was typed correctly. The amount was right down to the cent. The logo matched the sign bolted outside. Everything about it felt aggressively normal. That's why the date slid past my eyes without setting off alarms. June 14th. 5 years ago. I laughed actually. A tired, dismissive sound. The kind you make when something is obviously a mistake and not worth real thought. Payroll glitch. Old check stock. Some accountant cutting corners. If you'd taken the job, you would have done the same thing. You wouldn't have stopped working over a number printed in faded ink. Still, I remember folding the check slowly. I remember the weight of it in my pocket feeling heavier than paper should. I remember thinking I'd ask about it in the morning, assuming morning was still a real thing here. That was before I noticed the doors hadn't opened once all night. Before I realized the phones didn't have dial tones. Before I started wondering why a place officially closed for years still needed someone to keep watch. I hadn't questioned the interview either. How it happened over a landline with static, or why the manager never showed his face. At the time, I was just grateful for work, for routine, for somewhere that asked nothing of me but silence and paid me to stay awake until dawn came eventually. That's when I started thinking back to how this job began, back when it still felt normal. It was supposed to be temporary. That's what I told myself when I accepted the night shift without asking too many questions. I needed money, fast, and night work always paid a little more for a little less dignity. My rent was late, my fridge was empty, and the idea of sitting quietly in a forgotten building sounded easier than explaining gaps in my resume. The place had been described as abandoned but repurposed, which felt like a polite way of saying no one wanted it during the day. The exterior looked dead enough. Boarded windows, a sign faded to illegibility, weeds breaking concrete like they were reclaiming territory. Inside, though, it was clean in a bare minimum way. Swept floors, working elevators, emergency exit maps still taped to the walls, yellowed with age. Night work trains you not to ask questions. Empty hallways become co-workers. Echoes become company. I joked to myself about being paid to haunt a place that couldn't afford real ghosts. I set my expectations low and was rarely disappointed. Nothing jumped out. Nothing chased me. The building felt dead, but not hostile. There were odd details, sure. Old safety posters warning about procedures no one followed anymore. Phones mounted to walls with cords cut short, their buttons worn smooth by decades of use. Every so often, one of them would ring once and stop, like a muscle twitching after death. I told myself it was crossed wiring, leftover systems misfiring in their sleep. The interview itself had been brief and strangely reassuring. No background check, no uniform, just instructions to stay inside, log anything unusual, and not let anyone in after midnight. Easy rules, comforting rules, the kind that make you feel like someone else has already thought about the danger for you. I convinced myself the place was safe because it was empty. Nothing bad ever happens where no one is left, right? That logic carried me through the first few shifts, through the silence, through the way the air, never quite warmed no matter how long the heat ran. I ignored that thought and went back to my desk, telling myself utilities get left on all the time. Cities forget things. Buildings slip through paperwork cracks. I wrote nothing in the log except the time, the weather, and a note about silence. Still, the hum felt louder after that. The lights felt intentional, like the building knew I'd noticed and decided not to bother hiding it anymore. It was easier to believe that than admit something impossible had already clocked in with me and planned to stay until morning whether I liked it or not while I pretended this was normal. Somewhere past 3 in the morning, I noticed lights on where no one worked. Not flickering, not emergency glow, but full overhead panels blazing in offices I'd been told were sealed. I stared at the security monitor and told myself it was a timer error. Old buildings love automation the way ghosts love chains. Someone forgets to turn a system off, and it runs forever. I walked the corridor anyway, shoes scuffing dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. Doors that were supposed to be locked opened with a gentle push. Inside, desks sat neatly arranged, papers squared, chairs tucked in like employees had just stepped out for coffee. It felt bureaucratically alive, which was worse than decay. Decay makes sense. This didn't. I kept narrating explanations under my breath. Maintenance came through early. A contractor forgot to sign out. I was new and didn't know the whole layout yet. The building tolerated these lies, humming patiently while I swallowed them. Back at the desk, I filled out the hourly log to steady myself. Time. Area checked. No incidents. When I flipped the page, my pen froze. The previous entry was signed. Not a scribble, not initials. A full name, written carefully, like someone wanted it read. I recognized it because it was etched into bronze in the lobby. The memorial plaque listed employees lost in the fire that closed the building. Dates, ages, titles. The name in the log matched one exactly, down to the middle initial. I checked twice, then a third time, as if repetition could erase ink. I laughed again, softer this time, and told myself it was a coincidence. People reuse names. Someone thought it would be funny. Someone didn't know. But the handwriting was old-fashioned, the kind you learned before keyboards replaced cursive. The timestamp was from 20 minutes earlier. I flipped backward through the log. More signatures. Different names. All familiar. All carved into metal downstairs. I thought about the lobby again. About how the plaque caught the light just right. Names gleaming while everything else dulled. I'd passed it every night without reading, because reading makes things real. I remembered the smell there. A faint sweetness under smoke that never fully left. If those people were gone, why were their routines intact? Why were their signatures fresh? The idea settled badly. Shifts don't end here, they just overlap. The building doesn't forget workers, it files them. That made a terrible kind of sense, the kind that clicks and locks behind you. I checked the exit camera and watched the doors stand open, unbreathing, waiting for someone scheduled long ago to clock back in. Night pressed on my ears, and the hum seemed pleased, like paperwork finally caught up with me there alone again, tonight now somehow officially, and without witnesses anywhere nearby at all yet still. That was when the phones rang. Not once, not twice. A slow cascade, line by line, echoing down empty halls that shouldn't have had power at all. I didn't answer. I just sat there, staring at the book, realizing records outlast people, and sometimes pretend they don't have to. I decided to check the archived employee files, because if I didn't give my fear a task, it was going to give me one I wouldn't survive. The archive files were stored on an old desktop that shouldn't have booted, but did. It whined awake like a resentful animal and loaded a directory labeled Staff, Night Operations. I told myself not to read into the wording. Companies love dramatic labels. Still, my fingers hesitated before clicking. Every file followed the same structure. Name, start date, position, no end date. I scrolled, heart ticking louder with each entry. The dates stretched back years past the official closure, clean and uninterrupted. Fires, lawsuits, condemnation notices, none of it mattered. The night shift continued. Worse, there were no gaps. No turnover, just additions. I cross-referenced the memorial plaque list with the files. Every name matched. Every single one. No day workers. No temps. Just nights. As if daylight erased people or disqualified them from permanence. I sat back and tried to breathe around the idea forming in my head. This wasn't a job listing. It was an intake form. The phone on the desk rang, sharp and immediate, like it had been waiting for that thought. I picked it up before I could stop myself. The voice on the other end was calm, male, and strangely compressed, like it was traveling through old walls instead of wires. "You're looking at records you don't need," it said. I asked who I was speaking to. The voice ignored that. "Night staff is required to log activity, not analyze it." I told him the files didn't make sense. That people listed were dead. There was a pause, long enough for static to creep in. Then, they're accounted for. I asked where everyone was. Another pause. "Working," he said, like it should have been obvious. Rules began to surface in the way rules always do, half-spoken, implied, enforced through tone. Don't leave your post. Don't unlock what's already open. Don't interact with day systems. I asked what day systems were. He told me not to worry about them. He sounded patient, like explaining gravity to someone mid-fall. I pressed harder, asked why only night staff appeared in the logs. The voice softened. "Night people understand continuity," he said. "Day staff doesn't last." That sentence lodged in me. I asked what he meant. He told me my shift was almost over and I should focus on finishing it correctly. The line went dead before I could respond. I looked back at the screen. A new file had appeared at the bottom of the list. My name, today's date. The cursor blinked next to position, waiting. I didn't type anything. I didn't have to. The word night populated itself. The realization settled fully then. The job was never vacant. It was cumulative. People didn't quit, they were retained. The building didn't operate on a clock, but a roster. As long as nights were covered, it stayed awake. I thought of the lights in empty offices, the ringing phones, the careful signatures. This wasn't haunting. It was staffing. I checked the time. All the clocks agreed now. 4 a.m. The hum deepened, satisfied. Somewhere above me, footsteps moved in unison, slow and purposeful, like coworkers aligning for a shift change that never came. The realization settled fully then. The job was never vacant. It was cumulative. People didn't quit, they were retained. The building didn't operate on a clock, but a roster. As long as nights were covered, it stayed awake. I thought of the lights in empty offices, the ringing phones, the careful signatures. This wasn't haunting. It was staffing. I checked the time. All the clocks agreed now. 4 a.m. The hum deepened, satisfied. Somewhere above me, footsteps moved in unison, slow and purposeful, like coworkers aligning for a shift change that never came. They never gave me a handbook, which should have been my first clue. Every job has rules written somewhere, even bad ones. This place preferred its rules learned the hard way, absorbed through fear and repetition. By the end of that week, I had my own list, carved into routine and anxiety. Rule 1. Don't enter rooms without windows after 2 a.m. I tried once, early on, and lost 15 minutes I couldn't account for. The log showed me returning, pen in hand, mid-sentence, like I'd never stopped writing. I don't remember leaving. Rule 2. Don't answer internal calls after 3 a.m. External lines were fine. Silence, mostly. But internal calls came from phones that weren't connected anymore. When you picked up, breathing answered. Not heavy, familiar. Rule 3. Don't acknowledge voices that use your name. They always sound helpful, calm, sometimes apologetic. Once, it sounded like my mother, asking if I was eating enough. I learned to keep my head down and my mouth shut. Rule 4. If you hear footsteps matching yours, stop immediately. Whatever's copying you doesn't like improvisation. It prefers schedules. I'm telling you this because you think you'd notice. You think you'd question it sooner. I thought that too. Exhaustion smooths edges. Repetition dulls alarms. If you're listening to this late, tired, eyes heavy, understand how easy it is to accept guidance wherever it comes from. There were more rules I couldn't fully articulate. Don't read plaques out loud. Don't straighten chairs you didn't move. Don't ask about benefits. And one rule everyone followed without ever saying: never finish the list. That one felt deliberate, like the building didn't want clarity, like naming the final condition would activate it. I left space at the bottom of my notebook, a blank line I refused to fill. The rules gave me the illusion of control. As long as I followed them, nothing overtly bad happened. The lights stayed where they were. The logs stayed consistent. The footsteps remained distant. I started believing I could last. That was the mistake. Because rules here aren't barriers. They're training. They narrow your behavior until deviation feels dangerous and compliance feels safe. You stop noticing when you're being guided somewhere specific. The night I broke a rule, I didn't realize it. That's important. I didn't step into a forbidden room or answer a ringing phone. I just responded. Someone behind me said my name, casually, like we'd worked together forever, and without thinking, without remembering my own list, I turned around. Someone online asked if I'd been hired too, and that was when the floor dropped out from under me. I found the thread buried in an archived forum, years old, half the links dead. The title was generic, forgettable, but the building name was spelled exactly right. Inside were posts describing the same night shift, the same empty halls, the same calm voice on the phone that never gave a name. I read them like confessions. One user joked about being paid to watch a corpse breathe. Another mentioned the memorial plaque and asked why their own name wasn't on it yet. Replies stacked up fast at first, people comparing rules, confirming details no outsider could guess. Then the tone shifted. Posts got shorter. Typos crept in. Sentences ended abruptly, sometimes mid-word. I scrolled until my eyes burned. One account described the supervisor's voice perfectly, right down to the pauses. Another warned that leaving mid-shift was considered abandonment, not resignation. That word appeared again and again, like legal language copied from somewhere official. The last reply in the thread was time-stamped minutes before the fire. It read, "If you're thinking about quitting, don't," and nothing after. I felt relief first, which surprised me. Proof meant I wasn't insane. The building wasn't improvising just for me. It had a system, a history, a backlog of workers who'd asked the same questions in the same order. That relief curdled quickly. None of them came back to say they escaped. None posted updates. Accounts went silent, usernames frozen in time like the clocks inside the building. I typed a reply and deleted it. I didn't want to leave evidence. The forum felt watched, like the phones. Still, I printed the thread and folded it into my bag. If quitting was abandonment, then staying was compliance, and neither option sounded survivable. I checked the time. My next shift started in an hour. I told myself I'd work one more night. Just one. Long enough to learn what happens at the end. I didn't post a warning. I didn't reach out to anyone else. Something in the rules suggested spreading knowledge counted as leaving your post early. The building rewarded patience, not heroics. As I walked back toward it, the lights inside were already on, bright and welcoming, like I'd never left at all, like it knew I'd chosen to come back. That decision still feels like the moment it officially hired me. Everything before was paperwork. Everything after was obligation. I crossed the threshold with the printed pages in my pocket and the taste of dust in my mouth, telling myself knowledge was power, even as the doors locked behind me and the building prepared another shift change. I thought staying meant control. I thought understanding the system would keep me human inside it. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. At the time, all I knew was that the night hadn't finished with me, and I was about to clock back in. I promised myself answers, not realizing the building already had plans for me that night. Only now. The building was never the business. That realization came slowly, pieced together from records that were never meant to be read together. Municipal permits listed different company names across decades, all approved, all closed, all replaced. Retail, storage, records management, night security. The name changed, the logos changed, but the address stayed fixed, stubbornly alive while everything else around it aged. I spent my breaks digging through public databases, archived newspapers, fire reports, missing persons bulletins. Employees vanished without investigations. Files marked resolved with no conclusions. Every missing case shared one detail: last known employment, night shift, same address. The building didn't kill people. It retained them. That distinction mattered. Predators hunt. This place processed. It fed on routine, on compliance, on people who showed up when told and stayed until relieved. Day businesses were camouflage, temporary skins it wore to justify utilities, payroll, inspections. When scrutiny grew uncomfortable, the name changed. The night roster didn't. Containment appeared in the margins of old permits. Not the word itself, but phrases dancing around it. Limited access. After-hours operations only. No public occupancy. I realized the building wasn't failing regulations. Regulations were built around it. Someone, somewhere, decided it was safer staffed than sealed. Reading further made my hands shake. Internal memos referenced continuity events, staffing thresholds, acceptable losses. The fire that closed the place publicly was logged privately as a successful reduction. Fewer variables, fewer day witnesses. The building adapted, slimmer but efficient. Workers didn't disappear. They were absorbed, folded into operations, redistributed as noise, footsteps, signatures. The supervisor's voice wasn't a manager. It was an interface, a translation layer between human labor and whatever the building actually was. Understanding this didn't make me safer. It stripped away denial. I wasn't unlucky. I was selected. I fit the criteria: desperate, compliant, nocturnal. The rules weren't for protection. They were onboarding. I checked the staff directory again. My file status had changed. Where temporary once sat, a new word blinked calmly. Permanent. No end date. No appeals. I stared at it until the lights dimmed slightly, acknowledging recognition. That was when I understood research here is a one-way door. Knowing reframes you into a resource. The building wasn't watching me anymore. It was counting on me. That knowledge sat heavy during the shift, changing every sound. Footsteps weren't echoes anymore. They were workflow. The hum was processing, not ambience. Even my breathing felt logged, measured against thresholds I didn't know existed. I started noticing subtle adjustments. Doors closed a second sooner. Lights brightened when I slowed. The building responded like software refining inputs. I searched for an exit clause and found none. Permanence wasn't punishment, it was classification. Once identified, you belonged. Leaving would introduce instability. Instability required correction. That was why abandonment mattered. It wasn't moral. It was mechanical. I thought about the people before me, about how gently the system eased them in. Routine first, rules second, knowledge last. By the time you understand, resistance costs more energy than compliance. The building doesn't need force. It waits for exhaustion to do the work. I felt something like grief then, not for myself, but for the version of me who thought this was employment. That person still believed shifts ended. I looked at the clock and watched it move again, steady now, satisfied. Somewhere above, files updated. Somewhere below, space adjusted to accommodate another permanent role. I finished the shift anyway. That's the worst part. Understanding didn't make me stop. It made me efficient. The building likes that. It learned my pace, my habits, my silence, and filed them carefully. I tried to quit at 3:12 a.m., which felt like a reasonable time to reclaim myself. I wrote a note in the log, concise and polite, stating I was resigning effective immediately. The pen worked. The ink dried. Nothing stopped me. That should have been my warning. I walked to the front doors with my bag over my shoulder, heart hammering but steady. When I pushed them open, I stepped into the same lobby from the other side. Desk behind me, lights unchanged. No sensation of movement. Just continuity, folded wrong. I tried again, faster. Same result. Each exit returned me somewhere interior, like the building had run out of outside. The clocks noticed. They began to tick backward, seconds retracting, minutes swallowing themselves. My phone died without losing battery, screen frozen on the time I decided to leave. The supervisor called, not through the phone, through the ceiling, the vents, the walls pressing sound inward. This time he used my name carefully, like he'd earned it. He asked why I was abandoning my responsibilities. I said I was done. He said done wasn't a recognized state. The building compressed. Hallways shortened. Corners arrived too soon. The desk was suddenly always in sight, an anchor I couldn't escape. Lights brightened when I moved away from it, dimmed when I returned, hurting me with illumination. Fear didn't interest the system. Resistance did. I shouted at it, at the walls, at the voice, demanding to be let go. The logbook slid across the desk on its own, open to my file. The word permanent pulsed softly, patient. I felt the building adjust around my refusal, like a machine recalibrating after unexpected input. I ran. Footsteps multiplied, not chasing but synchronizing, matching my pace perfectly. Doors appeared where none had been. Rooms duplicated, furniture repeating like copy-paste errors. The air thickened, making effort expensive. Every attempt to leave generated more interior, more work, more night. The voice softened. It told me quitting was inefficient. That permanence reduced error. That I was already integrated. It asked me to return to my post and finish the shift correctly. For a moment, terrifyingly, compliance sounded restful. I stopped running. I faced the desk. My reflection stared back from the dark monitor, eyes rimmed red, posture already familiar to the room. I understood then that the building wasn't offended. It was correcting me. I tried logic next, because panic wastes energy. I recited labor laws, notice periods, contract terms I barely understood, as if legality could override architecture. The building responded by producing forms, sliding them from printers that weren't plugged in, each page demanding signatures, initials, timestamps. I tore them up. More appeared. The floor vibrated with quiet approval. Compliance generated paperwork. Refusal generated more. I attempted sabotage. I pulled breakers, yanked cables, smashed cameras. Power rerouted instantly. Lights blooming brighter, screens healing themselves. Damage only taught the system how to avoid damage. The voice reminded me gently that maintenance was not my role. Time distorted further. Windows showed different hours, different weather, sometimes fire. My body lagged behind intention. Hunger vanished. Fatigue sharpened. I understood then that the building wasn't preventing exit. It was optimizing retention, smoothing resistance until staying required less effort than leaving. Every calculation ended the same way, margins collapsing, options erased, the system nudging me toward the desk, toward routine, toward the simplest path, which was obedience, and silence felt increasingly expensive inside. I placed my hands on the counter and spoke to it directly, not to the voice. I told it I wouldn't work for it. I told it I wouldn't stay. The lights flickered, not angrily, but attentively. Somewhere deep in the structure, something paused, listening, deciding how to respond to a problem it hadn't anticipated. That was when the building answered me without intermediaries, and I realized confrontation here meant becoming a variable instead of an employee. I didn't move from the desk. My hands hovered above the logbook as the building shifted around me. Hallways expanded and contracted subtly, almost like lungs breathing. The hum was patient, expectant, and then, unmistakably, it spoke. Not the supervisor's voice this time, but the building itself. Soft, internal, a vibration across every surface. "You understand now," it said. "You see the rules. You know the limits." I swallowed. "I don't belong here," I said aloud, though my words sounded thin and empty. "You do. Everyone does," it replied, corridors reflecting the words visually in patterns of light on the walls. Continuity, preservation, labor. I realized it wasn't threatening me with force. It was offering me a contract of survival, but the terms weren't negotiable. Compliance, training, replacement. I didn't fully understand until it continued. Observe, instruct, prepare the next. Those who follow the schedule maintain the system. Those who resist, the sentence trailed into silence, but the message was clear. Resistance was absorbed into procedure. People weren't destroyed, they were incorporated. Their actions, their shifts, their routines folded back into the building's operation. I tried to reason, but what happens to them? The ones who come after me. You teach them, the building said. You guide them through. The cycle continues. Survival is adaptation. Adaptation is participation. You will not leave empty-handed, but neither will you leave unchanged. I realized the moral trap. Survival demanded complicity. Compliance meant endurance, but at a cost. If I walked out, the building would correct, repeat, fold my absence into efficiency. If I stayed, I would become part of the machinery, teaching someone else how to join it willingly. You will instruct, the building said, light patterns on the ceiling forming the outline of a clipboard, signatures, and check marks. Or observe their failure. I asked, voice trembling, is there a choice? There was a pause that stretched across minutes, measured in the rhythm of my own heart. Then, choice is procedural. You may choose method, not outcome. Accept continuity, or contribute to disruption. Each shift defines the next. You know this now. I glanced at the security monitors. Ghostly images of previous night staff flickered across the screens. They moved efficiently, mechanically. Some paused to write in logs I could never read completely. Others walked through rooms that no longer existed in my memory. Their routines were embedded in the walls, in the hum, in the way the air itself seemed to guide me toward my post. You will train the next one, it repeated. Teach them the rules, the timing, the compliance. You will warn, but not intervene. You will ensure the process endures. I felt my pulse hammer in my ears, knowing that the only alternative was being folded into the system myself. Not harmed, not killed, just absorbed, leaving only a trace, a signature, a log entry, a seed in the rotation that no one would notice was missing. I thought about escape, about storming out into the streets, but the exit still looped back inside. Hallways shifted. Clocks reversed and warped. The building's architecture responded to desire. My body obeyed gravity and inertia, but the building obeyed expectation. I realized survival had a face, and it was mine mirrored back from the desk screen. My reflection blinked, and I caught movement just at the corner of my eye where it shouldn't have been. Another set of eyes, faint, observing me as I hesitated. The next one had already begun the journey. I understood the rules fully, finally. Every night shift, every signature in the log, every step through the hallways contributed to continuity. To leave or resist wasn't a question of morality. It was a procedural error. Compliance ensured persistence. Defiance ensured assimilation. I knew what the choice demanded. I sat down, opened a blank page in the log. I typed instructions as clearly as I could. Times, procedures, warnings about the rooms, the phones, the plaques. I typed my observations of the hum, the lights, the way the building calibrated itself to each worker. Every word was a map and a warning, every sentence a bridge to the next person. Footsteps echoed behind me, not menacing, just present. I glanced over my shoulder. A figure lingered at the corridor's bend. They hesitated. I nodded once. The hum shifted, approving. I understood that in this role, humanity was measured differently. Ethics had been replaced with rhythm and repetition. Fear was necessary, but to be human in the night meant accepting that your presence ensured someone else's survival. I finished the instructions, printed them, folded them carefully, left them on the desk. I didn't need to place my name. The building already knew, already remembered, already logged me as permanent. And then the night settled fully, silent but alive, waiting for the next shift, for the next set of eyes, for the continuation of labor that never ended. I leaned back, chest tight, mind alert, understanding both my power and my role. The hum carried on, patient, footsteps in sync with mine, instructions ready. The choice had been made, not by me entirely, not fully by the building, but it had been made, and silence followed. The building is gone, not closed, not condemned, gone, like it was never poured into the ground at all. I went back weeks later in daylight, standing where the entrance should have been, and found a fenced lot with fresh gravel and a city notice about future development. No scorch marks, no foundation, no plaque. I checked records, maps, permits. Nothing listed an address there. It felt like memory without an anchor. I survived, technically. That's the word people use when they want the story to end. Life resumed with its usual demands, but my body didn't get the memo. I still wake at night at precise intervals, heart racing at 3:12 a.m., hands searching for a logbook that isn't there. My phone alarms feel like orders. Silence feels like oversight. Habits outlast structures. I catch myself pacing rooms in slow, efficient routes, optimizing paths through my apartment. I avoid windows after dark. I answer calls before they finish ringing. When I hear footsteps matching mine on the sidewalk, I stop instantly, breath held, waiting for permission that never comes. I tried to explain what happened. Friends laughed gently, then worried, then stopped asking. Doctors wrote notes about anxiety and sleep disorders. They prescribed routines, ironically. I followed them too well. Compliance is a muscle. It grows with use. Disobedience still costs me more energy than I have most days. There are no records of the people who worked there. I searched. Missing posters never existed. Forums are gone. Links rot faster than truth. If the building was containment, erasure was the final protocol. What remains is imprint, a way of thinking, a schedule etched into nerves. Sometimes I feel watched when I'm efficient. When I complete tasks without complaint, the room feels brighter, approving. When I hesitate, lights flicker. I know that sounds impossible. I also know how it feels to be logged. I don't work nights anymore, but night works me. I keep strict hours without meaning to. I line things up. I leave notes for myself I don't remember writing. Survival didn't free me, it reclassified me. The structure is gone, but the institution persists, portable now, embedded. If this is aftermath, understand it isn't an ending. It's a continuation without walls. And that's worse. Daylight doesn't help. I still inventory exits in grocery stores, still feel the urge to badge in at doors that don't have readers. When paperwork appears, I file it instinctively. When instructions are vague, I supply my own. I dream in checklists. I wake with the sense of having completed something important, though nothing has changed. Sometimes I swear I hear a hum beneath the city, thin but familiar, as if continuity learned to travel. If it ever asks again, I don't know what I'll say. Until then, I keep my head down, follow routines, and hope permanence fades. Knowing hope itself is another habit I learned too well, without walls, without logs, without witnesses. If you've ever pulled a late shift, stayed past exhaustion, or followed instructions so rigidly that your own thoughts blurred, listen closely. You've probably worked there too, even if the building never existed on any map you can find. There are other sites, other addresses, other jobs that operate under the same silent rules. Maybe you brushed past them thinking it was just night work, just temporary staffing, just the monotony of being awake when the city sleeps. Maybe you didn't notice the shifts folding you in, the routines teaching you obedience without reward. I've read accounts, obscure forum posts, brief mentions in online archives, jobs that vanish from schedules, emails that disappear from inboxes, coworkers who leave quietly and never return. Some are nothing, some are warnings. Some are the building, or what it has become. I'm telling you this because acknowledgement matters. Reading this, understanding even a fraction of it, counts. You are being cataloged in the way the system understands. Observation equals participation. Share your stories, leave comments, theorize. Every interaction feeds memory, preserves detail. Silence does the same. Curiosity isn't harmless. It's the first step in orientation. I'm not asking you to fear blindly. I'm asking you to recognize, to see patterns where you might have overlooked them, to understand that night, labor, repetition, these are the doors. If you work late shifts, if you respond to prompts without questioning them, if you've ever felt a subtle pulse in empty hallways or quiet offices, consider that the rules are already teaching you, whether or not you realize it. Survival doesn't require awareness, but understanding ensures you carry the knowledge forward. And the building, wherever it is tonight, is patient. So before your next night shift, before you answer a call, before you follow instructions too precisely, pause. Remember what you just read. Consider whether the room around you is empty or merely waiting. Your desk, your workstation, your routine might already be cataloged. And when you blink at the clock tonight, remember, some jobs never end, and some workplaces never close. The hum continues, even in your quietest moments.